everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Male Perspective. I am your host, Lana Reid, and today is another amazing day. I get to sit down with another one of these wonderful men of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. Today, I have with me Brother Ronald Johnson, Esquire. He is currently the Senior VP and General Counselor and Chief Risk Officer at the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland. And I'm so looking forward to spending some time with him and being inquisitive about the work that he is doing. But first and foremost, sir, as I always do, I take a quick moment to pause and say thank you to you for making time for me today. Time is a gift.
Thank you.
Yeah, time is a gift. Once we give, we can't get it back. So I truly appreciate you setting aside this time to chat with me. And with that, sir, welcome to the show.
Well, I appreciate it. It's a pleasure to chat with you, Ms. Reid, and I love the platform that you have and that you build. And hopefully, I'm able to participate and offer some pearls of wisdom.
I'm sure you will. Your place of employment is very intriguing to us general population people. So, well, before I get going, prying into your professional career and such, let me first ask, how long have you been a Sigma man, and where did you pledge?
So I crossed over in the spring of 1989, and I pledged at the Beta Nu chapter at Cleveland State University in Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay, so when you enrolled in Cleveland, was law your desired outcome?
Well, I always wanted to be a lawyer. My major was finance, and I figured at some point in time I would go into banking, which is what I did.
Okay.
And eventually I was able to enroll in law school and become a lawyer for a bank. So that's pretty much my career. Most of my career has been as a lawyer working in the financial services industry.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to get into that. I got some questions for you today. Now, my first curious question is, and I'm pretty sure, there's a lot of other folks out there like me, but you work for the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland, and, most of us really don't understand what this place is and what it does. So can you give us the baby step introduction to all that goes on there?
Absolutely. So there's probably, I think, three major functions or three major roles that the Federal Reserve Bank plays. Most people hear about the Federal Reserve in terms of monetary policy and working with the Board of Governors. There's 12 Federal Reserve districts, and several of those Federal Reserve Bank presidents sit on the Federal Open Market Committee. And that committee sets the interest rates that are used to that form really the basis of most consumer loans, mortgages, credit cards, et cetera. And so when a lot of people think of the Federal Reserve, they're thinking about the Fed in terms of monetary policy, and that's one of the major functions. The Federal Reserve has two major mandates. One is to promote price stability within our economy. And so the monetary policy is one mechanism through which the Fed does that. And then also working with the government to determine whether or not to print money in order to address inflation. And that's where the price stability comes into play. The other mandate for the Federal Reserve is to promote maximum employment. And so, again, a lot of the policy work that the Federal Reserve does is for those particular two mandates. But some other pillars that the Fed does is it also regulates financial institutions.
Okay.
So there's a supervision and regulation function, and that is a very important function because they ensure that our financial system and the banks that support the financial system are sound and operate in a safe and sound manner. And then the third major function of the Fed is to provide payment services for the federal government. So all the payments that the government receives and makes are generally processed through the Federal Reserve Bank. So it can be collecting tax payments, from IRS, or if people are paying for licenses from the Wildlife Bureau, or any type of government payments, then the Federal Reserve has the payment mechanism in order to facilitate those payments on behalf of the federal government. So that's the high level that the Fed does in general. And then all the reserve banks also have community outreach functions. So even in Cleveland, the Federal Reserve has a community affairs department where they actually work with local communities to educate the public, particularly young people, about financial wellness, about financial mobility. They teach people about, the money system, what the Federal Reserve Bank does, so that our public is more educated about money and finance. And then they also work with community leaders and industry experts to build and study policies around payments, cryptocurrencies, just a lot of things to help facilitate economics within our country. So there's a lot that the Federal Reserve Bank does. And to your point, a lot of people don't really know about it. But I would always encourage people to visit the Federal Reserve Bank websites. There's all kinds of information that's out there for people who study economics. For example, there are all kinds of data, economic data, that researchers and students can leverage to assist in their economic studies. And then there's just a lot of general information to the public around money and finance and banking.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, thank you for that. Now, let me ask you this. Is the health of the Federal Reserve Bank in the United States, does that parlay itself into other global banking systems?
Yep. So the Federal Reserve is the central banking system for the United States. And, I think just about every country, if not most of them, most all the countries have a central bank, a central bank. So the Federal Reserve and the Board of Governors, they actually collaborate and partner with other central banks just to share perspectives, share information in order to help support our world economy. Okay. So for those people who pay attention, when you are looking at monetary policy decisions here in the United States, some of those same people are also looking at monetary policy decisions that are made in Europe or in UK or in Africa, because they all have an impact on local economy. And so there's a lot of collaboration among the central banks just to ensure that they're helping to manage the economic goals and objectives of each country.
So our inflation here would have an impact on inflation, say, in South Africa or something?
So there's interconnectedness when it comes to economics. So what happens here in the US does have an impact overseas and vice versa. And that's why it's really important for really all of the countries through the central banks and other mechanisms to really stay connected because there is an impact. So sometimes decisions that are made in the UK will have an impact on, the stock market, for example, here in the US and vice versa, because we truly operate in a global economy.
Gotcha. Yeah. I would assume most folks don't, well, the regular average citizen doesn't understand that. So thanks for putting that in perspective. Now, let me ask about you. What is your role and responsibility within the Federal Reserve Bank?
So I really serve two major responsibilities. So as the general counsel, I'm the chief legal officer for the Federal Reserve Bank in Cleveland, which means that I lead the lawyers that really support all of the work of the Federal Reserve. So whether it's issues relating to contracts or employment issues or supporting the policy work, the legal team provides the legal resources and the legal support for those functions. And then the other hat that I wear is the chief risk officer. And so we have a separate group of individuals that provide risk management oversight for our particular bank. And so that means making sure that we have a good line of sight on various risks of the day that we have to manage. So things would, examples would be making sure that our computer systems are safe and secure,
Oh, so,
making
okay.
sure that our facilities are safe and secure, making sure that people are following our policies and procedures and that we're maintaining confidential information. All of those things pose different types of risks that we actually monitor and then work with our partners within the bank to ensure that those things are handled appropriately.
Oh, okay, so yeah, you're hearing more and more often about these cyber attacks and takeovers with certain things. So the Federal Reserve Bank is an operation that we would not want stuff like that to happen to. So
Absolutely. And the Federal Reserve, I mean, every single organization on the face of the planet faces cyber threats.
yeah.
Libraries, universities, banks, government agencies, airlines. So most organizations, if not all, have some form of risk management, and so we do as well.
Okay, awesome. Now, you mentioned in the beginning that you went to college for to become a lawyer, and we see that's the design where you're working now. But what was the pathway for you to finally get to where we see you now?
Yeah. So and thanks for that particular question because it's everyone's path is different. We all have experienced different things, and so I'll just share that it took me 7 years to get my undergraduate degree because I had to figure out a way to navigate through school and get through school. I attended Cleveland State University in Cleveland, Ohio. But if I'm honest, that wasn't the school that I wanted to attend when I graduated high school. I wanted to go someplace, and I just didn't have the opportunity to do that. And so for me, the pathway was figuring out ultimately what I wanted to do, but understanding that the pathway wasn't going to be linear. It was going to be some zigs and zags. It was going to take a little bit of time. I might have to pause or pivot. Before I went to law school, I actually got an MBA. And it wasn't my plan to get an MBA, but part of the way I was able to achieve my higher education was I took advantage of tuition reimbursement programs for the companies that I worked for, because I actually worked full time and went to school part time. That's how I completed my undergraduate degree. That's how I completed MBA. And then that's also how I completed my law degree. And so I got an MBA because I knew I needed graduate education. I wanted to go to law school, but my employer at the time didn't offer tuition reimbursement for law school. So they offered it instead for the MBA. So that's what I did.
Okay.
Ultimately, I changed employers, and then I was able to not only get a new job with new great experience, but was also able to get some assistance to fund law school education. And so that was really the pathway for me to achieve my goal. And but for the grace of God, I mean, I was in law school and approaching graduation, and I was working in a job that didn't require a law degree, wondering if I was going to actually become a lawyer, and I ultimately did. There was an opportunity that came up in that company's law department where I was able to move in and begin my legal career.
Awesome.
So that's the pathway.
Awesome. So has your legal career and finance, have they always been intertwined, or?
So I would say that law was probably more like a second career for me. So I had actually been in industry for about 15 years before I moved in, became a lawyer, went to law school. So I would say a non-traditional student. I didn't go to law school right after college. I had some work experience, and I think that served me well.
Great, great. Now, let me ask you, moving forward, because we have high expectations and aspirations for Mr. Johnson here. There's this gentleman in the world, the Federal Reserve banking world, called Mr. Powell, right? And he is, if I'm understanding the title correct, chairman of the board. Is that his correct title?
Yes, he's the chair of the board of governors.
So for us who are advocating for Mr. Johnson, what is the pathway for an individual to one day be in his position?
Wow, that's a good question. Chairman Powell is a very well-respected economist with a long history studying economics and banking and finance in particular. And so I think the pathway for someone to be in that type of role is really to have a strong connection to the Federal Reserve System and to monetary policy. It is a very cerebral role. There are a lot of smart people, PhD economists that study theory. They run models, they collect a lot of data, and there's a lot of research that accompanies the monetary policy decisions. And so, in my opinion, and I'll just say that on this podcast, anything that I say is just my opinion only, not the opinion of my employer. But in my opinion, the people that serve at the board really have to understand data and be able to interpret data, make connections, but use also some common sense. But they have to be really, really connected to the community. So one of the things that all of the Federal Reserve banks do is they perform a lot of research. They meet with business leaders in their districts to understand what economic issues those companies are dealing with, because all of that informs their policy thinking. So they'll talk to large corporations, small business, hospitals, universities, because the idea is to get as much data as possible so they can understand how the monetary policy decisions they're making are affecting our businesses and affecting our communities. So people that have the ability to do that kind of work and put those things in perspective, I think those are some of the important skill sets. And then the other important thing is being able to communicate with legislators and decision makers that have divergent missions and goals and objectives. The Federal Reserve is independent from politics. It's independent from government. So the decisions that the Fed makes are not driven by partisan politics. But as we all know, there's partisan politics everywhere, and people have opinions about things. And even in politics, certain politicians may make comments or observations about the work of the Federal Reserve. And so being able to remain steadfast in the Fed mission and not be swayed by politics, but at the same time getting that important feedback, that's a skill. And that's not easy, that's not easy work. But it really is important, in my opinion, for people like Jay Powell to be able to do that effectively. And I think he does do that effectively.
Okay. So the people that sit on the board, is it a job posting somewhere, or are they elected to this position? How does that happen?
Yeah, so there's actually a legal framework for determining who gets appointed as a governor.
Oh, it's appointed. So, okay.
Yeah, so there are appointed positions.
Oh, okay.
And there's a whole legal framework out there that talks about it. But the members of the board obviously play a substantial role in establishing what the monetary policy is, and then also overseeing the Federal Open Market Committee, which is the committee that sets the interest rates here in the United States.
Okay. Now, I want to circle back because you mentioned that part of the responsibilities of the Federal Reserve Bank is community outreach or community efforts and impact. How would we see, and I know you mentioned economic education, what areas or what specific ways in which would we see you in the Cleveland area running programs? Is it something that people can enroll in and partake in? How does that play out?
Yep, so there's a couple different things that our community affairs functions do. So first of all, in Cleveland, we're part of the 4th Federal Reserve District. So there's 12 districts, and the 4th district encompasses Ohio, all of Ohio, parts of West Virginia, parts of Kentucky, parts of Indiana. And so we actually have Cleveland is the main office, and we have a branch in Cincinnati, and we have a branch in Pittsburgh. And then we also have people that serve on our board of directors for all 3 of those locations. And so our community affairs team, what they do is they will work with different communities or community organizations in different cities to run maybe a financial education program for young people. And so the organizations can certainly contact us if we're to explore different partnerships. And so that may involve sending employees to a program to meet with constituents or program constituents to talk about financial education. It can also mean that we host people to come into our locations, and where we can put on seminars about financial topics or educational topics. Maybe even at some point in time, we used to have tours, public tours. We had shut that down during the pandemic, but in the coming months, I think we're going to look to restart some of those things. But the whole point is really to help demystify the Fed to the general public. And then some of the partnerships are also focused on different constituent groups. So the youth, I think I mentioned this before, like high school students and junior high school students. But then sometimes we want to target people that have an interest in economics as a career. And so, we can offer, have partnerships that center around some of those things. So the bottom line is that there's a lot of flexibility in terms of the types of programming and the types of partnerships that we engage in. And there's contact information on our website so that people can reach out to us to find out what those opportunities are.
Okay, great. Now, kind of listening to some of your personal story and listening to the work that you're doing, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that it's not often that we see Black men moving in the spaces that you move in. If you had to give some advice or some pointers or some tips to a young Black male who wants to pursue this journey, navigate these spaces, what would you say to them?
Yeah. So this is really, really important to me, Ms. Reid. So when I was, young and dumb, I'm in college, I'm working, I'm trying to figure out, how to, pay tuition and get through school. I was very fortunate to have a male mentor who was a senior professional in his industry. He was not a Sigma, by the way. He was a Kappa, but I never held that against him. But what he did for me was he really taught me really 2 important things. One is because he was an African-American man, and he worked and he was probably, I think he was the only or the most senior Black officer in his organization at the time. And he had his own interesting story in his career. But he taught me that people are always paying attention to you, even if you never think that you do, that they are. And he actually helped me get my first internship, summer internship at the company where he worked. And then and I was able to parlay that into a permanent position. But he told me, he said, he's helping me get this job. He said, do not embarrass me, because he used his influence in a way that was helpful to me. And he said, people are always paying attention. And so, and what I'm going to say may sound old school, but it was important to me.
It works. It works.
Right. Even though business casual was what people wore, I wore a suit every day.
Great.
And he told me, wear a suit every day, because it's one way for you to stand out without saying a word. People are going to look at you and like wondering, who is this guy walking around here in a suit? And I was in a entry-level position, so I wasn't in an influential position. But he was right, people did pay attention. And then the second thing that he taught me was he actually connected me to my first outside community organization. He was on the board of a nonprofit, and they needed some volunteers to kind of do some work on a particular project. And he told me, you're going to do this. And I was like, well, I don't know if I have interest or time. And he said, no, this is what you're going to do. And here's why. And the why was, you need to start building a profile. And for many of us, especially for young people, it's sometimes difficult to build a profile within the company, because building a profile within the company means you have to be selected to participate on a project or given an opportunity, and sometimes they're just not available or they're earmarked for someone else. But if you do community work and you start working with nonprofit organizations, you can still build leadership skills, conflict management skills, strategic management skills. You can still learn how to read profit and loss statements, and you can still build those skills and build that profile. And they work actually in tandem. And so that was something that my mentor taught me. So my advice to people would be to try to find those mentors and advocates. And it's easier said than done. And there are many companies that have, mentoring programs where they kind of match people up together. And those are okay, but the best relationships are the ones that are dynamic. And those are harder to come by, but it really, really is important for people to find them. But the most important thing from that is that young people, we have to learn to listen, and we have to learn to receive. And if I think about now, some older gentleman telling me what I'm going to do and how I'm going to spend my free time, like that doesn't sound good, right? A lot of people would be like, I'm not going to do what this man said, but I did, because I knew at the end of the day, he was guiding me and he was giving me insight. And fortunately, I was open to it. And so it really benefited me.
And look at you now.
Wow. I'm still a work in progress, but I appreciate that.
Look at you now. But and let me ask you this one last question before I ask you my random question. There's a lot of discord sometimes today with the younger generation and folks in our age bracket about higher education. A lot of the younger folks are saying it's not worth it or whatever. I beg to differ. I understand that college is not for everybody, but if you had to share the benefits and the impact of pursuing higher education, what would you say to the young folks?
Well, I happen to believe that higher education is critically important, and I get it. When I think about the cost of higher education now compared to decades ago, it's crazy. And I've got college kids, so I know what the price tag looks like for higher education. But I think sometimes from my opinion, when people look at the cost of education, what they're really talking about or really looking at is what's the cost per credit hour for the classroom. And, you know, I agree. Yeah, it's high. It's expensive, and there's really no good reason for it, in my opinion. But college is more than just going to class. So college is about, you know, it's when you're transitioning from being a teenager, and it's an important transition to adulthood, where in most cases you're on your own and you're living and dying by the decisions that you make, whether it's getting up and going to class at 8 o'clock or even setting your class schedule, right? It's learning how to advocate for yourself. So when you get that grade that you thought you deserved, that you didn't get the grade you thought you deserved, and you have to make a decision on how you're going to approach the professor. You know, am I going to approach the professor? That's the first decision. And then secondly, how do I do that in a constructive way? Like, those are skills that you learn and you develop, and they stay with you, and you apply those skills post-college and for the rest of your life. When you're involved in organizations, and I mean, not just I'm a member, but you're actually involved, you learn to meet people, you learn to talk to people that you wouldn't otherwise talk to, you learn how to be transparent, and you learn how to listen. You learn give and take, you learn how to develop and form meaningful relationships. For me, when I joined Phi Beta Sigma, eventually I became the president of the chapter. And it was really the first time that I got to understand what leadership was like, and how do you develop leadership skills, not just working with my frat brothers, but working with the school administration to make sure that our chapter met all its requirements. And if there were disputes that we had to resolve, you know, conflicts that we had to resolve, you know, I learned all of that stuff in college. Where else would I have learned that? If I didn't go to college? Maybe I would have, but that's where the college experience, I think, is more than just going to class. And so I definitely would encourage people to go to college. Yes, it's expensive, it's not easy, and I understand why people would question the value. But those are the things that I think, you know, that I highlight for people when they bring up that argument.
Yeah, we have learned so many life skills that parlay, you know, so long after the journey. You know, you get that impactful lessons in college. So, I mean, and like you said, it is expensive, but you just can't beat the life lessons. Well, sir,
right.
let me ask you my random question, and then we will wrap it up. I usually ask how people connect with you, but we'll just direct them to the website, so maybe they can see one of the community events in so let's see here. If your waiter or waitress was to be a total jerk, do you still leave a tip?
Good question. So the short answer is yes.
Okay.
I do. So I generally tip well, especially for people who give great service. But you know, I certainly wouldn't tip as well for the service person who was a complete jerk. But you know, at the end of the day, especially in this particular country, I mean, people live, you know, servers live off of tips. And so that person could have been having a bad day. They could have had, you know, a major life event that they were kind of struggling with. And so, you know, I'd leave a tip. I might leave a note with the tip. Or, you know, a note to say, disappointed in the attitude, you know, hope all is well, or, you know, it's just an encouraging word. But I would still live a tip because there's an economic reason for why they're doing that particular job.
Okay, I like that. You know, we're all having human experiences, so you know, like you said, you never know what's going on and what might be part of it. It might not just be that they give bad customer service. So
fortunately, I've never had that experience. So
in your 25 years, you've never had bad service?
I've never had someone that was a complete jerk. I've had bad service where I felt
Okay.
someone was inattentive, but I never had anyone that
Recently
was being
told.
just rude and disrespectful.
Okay, gotcha. So if we are ever in the Cleveland area, I think I heard you mention that people can come and possibly have tours of the facility. Is that available?
Well, yeah, so I would just direct people to the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland website, where they can locate tour information. It was something that the Fed, we did pre-pandemic.
Okay.
And I think now that we're a couple of years outside the pandemic, I think we're looking to reconstitute that. But I'm not sure if it's quite available just yet, but I think maybe by the summertime. But there's a lot of information on the website that people can explore.
Okay, I'll make sure to put the link in there. Well, sir, I thank you so much for giving us the crash course. I think some people think that we can roll up to the Federal Reserve Bank and go through the drive-through and get $40, but we can't do that, can we?
No, we cannot. I wish that was the case.
Okay. But anyways, I'm picturing my younger day with the cartoons of what Daffy Duck, and he's like mine, and all the currency and stuff like that. So I guess that's just my little childish dreams. But I thank you so much for your time and your lessons, especially imparting some wisdom to the younger generation as it pertains to pursuing your path, your professional path, and college education. I thank you for your time, and it's just so inspirational to see your journey, because I am just picturing that we don't get to see too many of our faces in the spaces that you travel. So it's just nice to know that we have some folks out there. So just thank you for being representation and an example, and for being you.
Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate your platform. I'll just give a quick shout out to Ultimate Connections for kind of bringing us together. I had a chance to watch some of the other podcasts that you've done, and I'm pretty sure I'm a follower now of your podcast. So I like what you're doing, and I appreciate the exposure that you're providing the public, and I appreciate being part of it. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That is all for this week's episode of The Male Perspective. I'm your host, Lana Reid, and I will see everybody next time.